So yeah, again, welcome everyone. We are just gonna go ahead and get started. I'm not going to do introductions of our panelists because they will introduce themselves. But my prompt for your introduction is to give us your name, what degrees you have, what position you have and where, what organization, and what your role model currently is or was when you were growing up.
Thank you. So I my name Nicolas. My name is Nicolas. My degree, I have a PhD in pure mathematics. I was already working on quantum error correction in my PhD, and it's what I'm doing today. I'm a researcher. I'm a principal researcher at IonQ. I just started like 2 days ago, so don't ask me anything about IonQ. And my role model, I think when I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut, like half of the little boys. And yeah, thank you.
All right, let's go ahead with Hari.
So I'm Hari Krovi. I did my PhD in electrical engineering, but I did it under a physicist. And I also took some math courses, so I kind of did all sorts of things. But my PhD was interestingly not, so it was focused a little bit on quantum algorithms. So yeah, I kind of covered, electrical engineering, math, physics, and even computer science already. But my postdocs were really where I got more into algorithms and computer science. Yeah, my role model, I don't know. I mean, it's a bit like Nicola. I guess I wanted to be an astrophysicist. I'm not sure if I came even close to it, but yeah.
All right, let's hear from Michelle.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I really just wanted to thank all the participants today. I wish I had something like this in grad school where I could have exposure to industry opportunities. So I'm excited for you all to get something today. And I just want to thank the panelists and, of course, Daniel and Constantina for inviting me to speak with you all. With that, I am indeed Dr. Michelle Lally, and I work at Quantinuum. So Quantinuum, if you're unfamiliar, it's actually a new kid on the block. It's a quantum computing company, but the research is older. So it actually started with Honeywell Quantum Solutions, which is US-based hardware, and Cambridge Quantum, which is UK-based software. They had a relationship, the two companies, for several years, and they formed Quantinuum in November of 2021. And I was hired about 8 months later, straight out of grad school, started officially in August. And I have been there for a little over a year. So in my role, I'm an advanced laser scientist. And so I work on a team where we develop, build, design, test, align all of the optical systems that support our quantum computing platform, which for Quantinuum is Ion Trap. And so we come up with innovative ideas. We make the current systems that we have more efficient. And so that's what my team does. My role model, I'll be cliche and name a family member, but it is my grandmother. I have a little bit of a different path to physics. So I actually was in finance and I went back to school for physics. So my role models used to be the investment bankers on Wall Street. And then, I woke up from that dream many years ago and ended up studying physics. And so my grandmother, just to, really show her the appreciation, the kind of matriarch of the family, a lot of the stuff that she's laid down for the women in our family. She's become my role model over the years, especially going back to school for physics. So shout out to Nini Green. And thank you.
Well, thanks, Michelle. All right, let's hear from Aaron.
Hi, everyone. My name's Aaron Lott. I did my PhD in applied math and scientific computing at College Park. Not doing quantum computing. My passion in research was solving AX equals B for problems of fluid dynamics. I did postdocs at NIST and Livermore. Currently senior scientist and manager and technical area lead in nanosensing, machine learning, and quantum computing at the academic nonprofit called University Space Research Association. And we serve primarily the NASA organization, and I'm part of the NASA Quail research team. And my role model is, I think, growing up, I had several really impactful teachers and coaches. And then in grad school, several professors that I really got a lot of value from their wisdom and insight and direction. So, yeah.
So thanks, Aaron. And finally, let's hear from Tuhin.
Hi everyone. My name's Tuhin Sahai. I'm a research scientist at a nonprofit lab called SRI, which was previously, it used to stand for Stanford Research Institute. I did my PhD in theoretical and applied mechanics, but it was primarily sort of applied math, where I focused on essentially building new algorithms for studying micromechanical oscillators. This was at Cornell, and then right after I joined industry, mostly as an applied mathematician, while I was at United Technologies that later became Raytheon. And over the years, I got interested in quantum computing, and so I dipped my toe in. I really enjoyed the beautiful math problems that arise there. And so that's become one of my sort of core areas of research. Growing up, I had many role models, just like Aaron said. My dad was one, and then my teachers, both in school as well as university. Some of them were very instrumental in sort of encouraging my passion for science and math. So I think that's who I would pick. Back to you, Daniel.
Right. Thanks so much, everyone. And I will repeat this because we have new people that showed up since I said it, but I do have a set of questions that we have prepared for the panelists, but really this session is about the participants and hearing, from them what you want to ask about. So I will ask the first question, but after that, feel free to raise your hand and ask something, or if you are not comfortable being recorded or just stating your question, put it in the chat and I will read it for you. So let's get started with sort of acknowledging that this is an industry panel in a university setting, and there's sort of this kind of like maybe a tension in thinking about these two sectors, right? So there's a conversation about how the academia might be different in some ways compared to industry, and how maybe the way in which we go about our learning in academic settings sometimes might not prepare us for going into that world. That might be artificial, that might not be artificial, there might be some reality to it. But so the question I'm gonna ask is based on that idea. And so I just wanted to ask how you ended up in your current position, as all of you having PhDs, and particularly if there was anything when you were going through undergrad and grad school that prepared you to land outside of academia. So let's start with in reverse, I guess, Tuhin first.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned briefly that, yeah, I did my PhD in applied math at Cornell. And I was not, focused on quantum at that time. I took classes in quantum physics in the physics department, so quantum mechanics, and I sat through some of them. And I really enjoyed it, but my PhD was not on that topic. And then essentially, right after grad school, I decided that I wanted to try out an industrial research position with the goal of applying for academia maybe in 2 or 3 years. I had a friend who had gone to United Technologies Research Center, which was the research arm for United Technologies, which was a big aerospace and commercial sort of conglomerate. So I had a friend there, and I asked him if there were roles, and there was an opening. So I started working there on sort of doing uncertainty analysis and very high dimensional optimization problems. So basically algorithm development for them. And I liked it so much that I sort of didn't really get around to going to academia. So I was writing papers. I was really enjoying working on sort of cutting edge things. In terms of like preparation, I think one thing that I find is very different from in an industrial research position that's different from academia is one has to be very versatile. And very often you cannot make assumptions. So and while I was doing my PhD, when things got hard, we'd make some sort of assumption to keep moving forward. But in certain industrial settings, those assumptions can be key, and sort of making them may actually not, may be the difference of having something useful versus not. And the versatility aspect is that very often you have to be sort of broader in some sense and have to pick up new things and new ideas, because like now I'm at SRI and even at Raytheon, the key thing there was that you have to sort of follow funding in some sense, and write proposals, and the sort of state of the art moves very rapidly, and it may not be always in your core area that you have to sort of push forward in. So that versatility is actually very important, and I at least in my experience, it was sort of very useful to sort of be able to learn new things. So my suggestion to junior, budding scientists would be to, keep your core area, but also try and keep learning things outside of your area, and you never know when it'll be useful. Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. And instead of just calling the rest in order, maybe if anyone can, if anything that Tuhin said might elicit you to talk about the way that you got into your career, or anything that resonates, maybe I'll just invite you to share next.
I would be happy to say a couple words. Yeah, I think it's important to have some survey of the landscape. I think when I was in College Park, I certainly had good visibility into a variety of research areas because it's a fairly large program, both from what other students, faculty, and also resources in terms of national laboratories for internships, things like this. So having a kind of a view of the landscapes, I think, was very useful. I didn't come into quantum through kind of a traditional path, so to speak. My interest is in more high performance computing architectures and algorithms. And my office mate was doing quantum computing when I was in grad school. And his advisor was my office mate at NIST for my first postdoc, both of which were working on quantum computing. And I kept solving AX equals B. And then eventually the opportunity to work at D-Wave came to me kind of out of the blue. And I felt it was a great opportunity to learn about quantum computing and at a very early stage, and kind of communicate what's being done in the space. The whole field has kind of exploded over the past 10 years or so since I got into it. And I think, as before, you mentioned, looking at the landscape and addressing the growth areas. I think data-driven algorithms, machine learning, advanced architectures like quantum computing, these are emerging areas of technology that I think a lot of the mathematical foundations are being applied in those contexts. Applications using these new developments of algorithms as well as architectures are going to continue to be the case. And I think having a firm foundation of mathematical analysis is important, but also kind of having an interest that kind of help draw you into new areas, I think is very important. It's not an easy field to be in unless you're really drawn to it in some sense. So I think accessibility to understanding the landscape, but also having an area in which how to learn and operate is important.
Okay. Any of the others want to share about how you got to where you are in these contexts?
Yeah, I'm happy to tell my story. Yeah, I did my PhD about 10 years ago, and at this time, the quantum industry was very different. It was pretty much inexistent, and there was very few jobs in quantum. I did that because I love it. I think it's fascinating. I followed my passion. It's risky, I think. After a postdoc, I was thinking it will be very difficult to find a job in quantum, and after that I got very lucky with the timing. I think the industry started to boom, and I got a job. Microsoft reached out telling me they are opening a position in my field, so I spent a few years at Microsoft. And I think the landscape is very different today. There is many opportunities. I think it's great for people studying math. We need problem solvers. We need people with strong math skills. And I also agree with the versatility that Tuhin mentioned. I think it's a good skill to be flexible, to be able to talk to other people. There is a gap between math and physics and computer science, engineering. The first gap is often the language. They do know the same concept, the same ideas, but with a different language. And getting used to communicating with different people with different background is very useful. And it's also how we create beautiful ideas, by mixing ideas from different fields. And one thing I like about, you mentioned the gap between academia and industry, and one thing I like is that working in your correction in academia, my job will be to design a noise model, think what could these qubits suffer from, what could be the noise on these qubits, design something that I find mathematically pretty, and work on that, trying to solve this problem. The difference with industry is that you can directly talk to the people building these machines. You can talk to the engineers, talk to the physicists, the scientists building these qubits, and try to figure out with them what are going to be their problem in a few years and solve them. You can work with real noise model in real machines, and you have access to that before academia, maybe 2 years before. You have an unfair advantage, and I find that exciting. And we are solving problems that are going to help them build this machine. It's something I find very exciting personally.
Yeah, Nicole, so I'm actually going to draw from your answer a little bit, and Harry and Michelle, feel free to then insert some of your career paths and how you got to where you are, if it's relevant. But you mentioned this idea of skills, and you kind of like talked about the concept of communication being an important skill. I wanted to ask kind of like a dual question. Feel free to address it from either of those points or both. But it's this concept of skills. So, you know, like what are some skills that the QIS industry is looking for from people that are coming out with bachelor's or graduate degrees? And the two branches that I want to address is, first of all, some transferable skills that maybe are not technical necessarily, similar to what Nicholas was suggesting about communication. But the other one is, we are here in a math quantum program, so we want to, there's a lot of math students, and maybe unlike some of you who kind of like ended up in QIS, maybe by sort of like, you know, that's how your path went about. Some of these students are actually going to be very intentionally planning to go from mathematics into QIS. So what are some transferable skills, and what are some maybe math related skills that are kind of like being sought in the QIS industry?
Should I go next? Oh, maybe, yeah. Okay.
Please do, yeah.
So I think like, you know, like Tuhin mentioned, versatility is definitely very useful. Like, you know, knowing your core stuff, but also being able to learn new things. I think the math skills that are useful in quantum are just, you know, many. In fact, my work with Constantina, in fact, touches upon differential equations, and in quantum algorithms in general, you're always looking for applications, right? So it's, you knowing the core stuff in quantum algorithms is one thing. But then you want to apply it to new things. So you have to go and find out, you know, these applications and learn about them, and then start figuring out how to apply these algorithms to, you know, those applications, right? Which is now a big thrust in quantum right now, because we kind of are interested in building these quantum computers, but the case to kind of really build them, what will they solve, is a question that we want answered as much as possible, because there are a few examples, but, you know, how many more can we get? And how compelling can we make them? So math skills that are needed here, for example, are, you know, obviously at a very high level. Many things like differential equations that I just mentioned, but probability theory, random matrices, you know, a group theory, representation theory, which has traditionally been very useful in quantum. and even topological analysis, for example, like homology and all that stuff. There were many works that kind of used all of these things, in fact. But I think what's useful for someone who wants to move into quantum is, maybe now, like Nicolas said, there's so much more out there, like in terms of startups and companies, and even many academic groups. I think doing internships, for example, is a great way, which I didn't have access to at that time when I was doing my PhD, which is I think before some of people here. So I think doing internships where you get to know what kind of skills you can actually use, like the company I work for, Riverlane, that I started last year, we hire a lot of mathematicians, both in the UK and over here, and physicists as well, whose backgrounds, in fact, are not quite quantum, but they come and learn. And then eventually, when they finish the internships, they can potentially join full-time also. So this is one nice way to kind of like bridge the gap. But let me pass the mic on to the others.
Yeah, anybody want to compliment?
Yeah, so I'll jump in quickly. So I actually did know that I was going directly into quantum information science. Again, as I said earlier, I went back to school for this, so I was aware of what industry opportunities were out there at the time. This was about 10 years ago when I started my trajectory in physics. So even though not math, I went along the physics track, it was still kind of a direct route, and not necessarily maybe coming from kind of a transferable field. I wanted to approach qubits from a photonic standpoint. And so a lot of my study was actually quantum optics, and that's my research background. So my PhD was from Louisiana State University, which at the time had a very strong quantum optics kind of theory group. And then it grew into an experimental group, which is what I wanted to do. And I say they had it because the main gentleman who was leading that has since passed on, but they still do like integrated photonics, what have you. And so that's something that I'd also add. So Hari had just mentioned some of the classes and courses. I'd say in transferable skills, I'd say depending on which platforms you want to work with, you also want to have kind of an understanding of the architecture. So for electron or kind of fermionic systems, matter-based qubits, you learn a lot about that with the harmonic oscillator. So any kind of formal quantum mechanics course, the language, of course, is math, which you all are experts at. But you still want to understand kind of how these systems work. For photons, of course, it would be quantum optics. So if you have access to a quantum optics course or somewhere, I could probably even find it maybe on YouTube, who knows, just to get that background and kind of see how the systems are different. But my path was a direct one. I knew that I wanted to work in the space. And about 10 years ago, I remember looking online when I kind of was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I saw his paper on like quantum teleportation, and I looked to see what kind of opportunities there were in quantum. And I remember looking at Raytheon BBN, which about a decade ago, they had a whole bunch of opportunities for quantum optical experimentalists, quantum optical theorists, et cetera, et cetera. Now I think they focus more on space for the BBN arm. Someone can correct me here. I think it was Hari. I know someone worked for Raytheon in the past. I think they're more space-based now.
And I actually overlapped there a little bit before we.
Gotcha. Okay. Because I was like, darn it, they're not doing quantum anymore. But so with that being said, I was looking at companies, including Honeywell Quantum Solutions, which when I first started wasn't really there. It was more of within the past decade, they started up their quantum arm at Honeywell. But so if you're looking and keeping your ear to the ground with companies, you'll see kind of what they have on their job description list. So look there, but what I also say, yes, of course, make sure you have good communication skills, try to put yourself in situations where you have to work with a team. So whether that's in various organizations on your campus, or if you work in a research team, but try to have that research team be diverse, as Nicolas alluded to earlier, because engineers, we all are talking about the same thing, but we speak about it in different ways. So engineers approach quantum from their language where, maybe their imaginary number is J, right? And our imaginary number is I, right, in the physics side. Or you may have mathematicians who come from a different language background. But when you work with a team, you start to learn that jargon, and that can be very helpful in industry. So if you can put yourself in that type of situation where you can do some interdisciplinary research as it applies to quantum, that's very helpful. But one of the things I did want to say is that it could be approached from a variety of different ways. So the people, I mean, we have aerospace engineers here, we have people who have math backgrounds, we have folks who have been in a variety of different kind of fields of expertise, and they brought that knowledge to this field. Those are all transferable skills. So when you're looking again at that job description and it lists 8 things and maybe you only have 2, don't count yourself out, because more than likely that organization is going to kind of teach you their way anyway. They just want to see how you solve problems. Can you bring innovative ideas? Can you take some of the things that they present to you and say, oh, you know, I've worked with this before. Have you guys considered this? And maybe give them a proof of principle concept. They just want to see really how people think and how you all think. And I think, thinking a lot, it would behoove you to kind of put yourself in the mindset of what they want to hire for. If this was your company, what would you want people to be able to do? You would want them to be able to interact together. And be able to speak the same language, and then maybe take what you know back to your team, explaining it in a way that they all understand, and then coming back to the table together for a more synergy. So keep in mind that interdisciplinary approach to the field, and try to expand your skill set or put some skills on your resume that show that not only do you have the math, the computational skills, especially for theory, but if you want to go into experiment and do some hardware, or even from the software side, that you know what it is to work with people in those groups and learn from people in those groups.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. So we do have questions coming in from the audience, but I want to give Aaron, Tuhin, and Nicola an opportunity to complement this question if you have anything to add in terms of, you know, like specific math or transferable skills.
Yeah, one thing I can add to that. I agree with everything that Harry and Michelle mentioned. Yeah, but one thing I want to add, which is, I don't know if it's a skill or maturity, but something I see in some people and that I appreciate is being resourceful. It's not something we learn at school, but you can see that some people may be tempted to be stuck with a problem and to wait until the next time they meet with a manager, they meet with their PhD advisor. And I see also some people who are extremely resourceful, who are going to go talk to people about their problem, go read something, ask for pointers, ask for other people to talk to, and they will figure it out themselves. And it's extremely important. I think it's I don't know even how I will teach this kind of skill, but it's something that I appreciate a lot when I work with people.
Yeah, I'm gonna just echo what has been said by Hari, Michelle, and Nicola. And I think I'll stress the resourceful part of it, which is that I'd say that the math part, like, have your foundations be strong. If you're solving, you know, you're coming to quantum computation or QIS from a math perspective, but then be problem driven. So the point will be, if you need to solve the problem, what is the math you need to learn to solve it? And then basically go from there. And it doesn't even have to be math. Like, I think very often, like, even like computational skills are also very important, to just sort of play around with things and, you know, write some code and get results. Because very often the results we get while playing around turn out to be very important. So, yeah.
Right, thanks, Tuhin. Yeah, so I think this question has partly been addressed in some way or another, kind of like broadly, but the question is a little bit more specific. So I'm hoping that we can get some of that specificity in. It's you know, let's say that you're an undergraduate student, you have room to take some coursework before graduation, And so would there be any specific coursework or fields of math that have a broader kind of like they set you up to be more competitively eligible for this type of job in a broader sense, not necessarily narrowing yourself down to like, because I think like, for example, some of the suggestion that Michelle was giving was like, oh, keep up with what's out there, and that will allow you to like say, oh, this is what I need to learn to go into this specific direction. Is there anything that's like more broadly applicable that you could just say, oh, I'm preparing myself to launch my career into QIS in a kind of like broader, more flexible way, like specific coursework?
I think especially for, I think this is one that you could do with very little prerequisites. I think numerical linear algebra is really a gateway into quantum, but also many other adjacent approaches and applied settings that I think this pays huge dividends. If you know how to do numerical linear algebra and some coding, you can go pretty far. Again, my background is AX equals B. I love it. It allows you to have a vocabulary in which to think about a lot of different things, and it's relevant. I think there's also, especially, in quantum probability statistics, calculus is very much core math. There's certainly some of the stuff that Hari mentioned earlier that's much more advanced and things that I struggle with personally, but hasn't been a blocker for me to be able to participate and make an impact in the field. But I think also the interdisciplinary research aspect of being able to actually be involved in a project, if there is a practicum, an applied research project in which you can actually get your hands dirty working on a problem, that will pay dividends in terms of opportunities. A lot of the people that I know who've gotten jobs make the jobs for themselves through internships. It's a lot of soft money based jobs, being able to have new ideas, proposals, network, and doing that by getting your hands dirty. There's no replication of it that I've seen other than going out there and figuring out what it is you like, working on it, and iterating.
Any compliments to that answer?
Yeah, I'll just jump in really quickly. I really want to piggyback on what Aaron said. So not only, finding these problems, but advertising yourself. So having your own webpage, maybe putting some of those solved problems on your webpage, or, if you're learning these skills. So say, for example, you take a course, this particular individual is asking about specific coursework. Yes, you can find a quantum computation class. You can find a quantum optics class, right? You may be able to find that on various types of free courseware that various institutions offer, where you can pick up an Isaac Chang and get the quantum information. I thought like the standard like QIS book. There are several of them now, but I know everyone here probably knows which one I'm talking about. And you can do that, right? So you can understand quantum circuits, you can understand the syntax and see the language. But I think to Aaron's point, in this day and age, the technology is so fast and it moves so fast that if you can have maybe a couple of projects on a web page that you can say, hey, not only did I learn Circ, Qiskit, Ticket, whatever, I kind of built these quantum circuit algorithms and it kind of solves this problem. I think you all at XYZ company are interested in that problem. That's a great thing to be able to say like during an interview. So, and I think it was Tuhin that said this, definitely get the mathematical understanding. And it may have not been Tuhin, I'm sorry, I'm trying to pay attention. Definitely get the mathematical understanding and make sure your coursework is that you're absorbing that. But really start looking at what industry wants to see, and it's actually getting a job done, and it's actually getting it done well, documenting what you have done, and then being able to present that to other people. So one of the things they don't teach a lot about in academia is if you want to go into industry, and to be fair, this is even the same in a national lab, that you oftentimes, yes, you present research in academia, but you're presenting it to a very multivariate audience when you're doing it in industry and at the national lab level. At national and military labs, you may be presenting your research to titans of industry, high-ranking officials. And so I'd say, yes, you can take the coursework. I listed a couple of them earlier. Design analysis of algorithms, the one that everyone loves, right, at the grad level, to be able to understand maybe how to incorporate these kind of quantum algorithms and what that could look like. But for the most part, you want to be able to take that and do something with it, put that on a resume, and then be able to talk about it when you are presenting that to a recruiter.
Yeah, that's a great point to make, Michelle, and I think it sort of like brings us to the second question this person had, which was related to the difference between seeking a job in QIS industry holding only a bachelor's degree versus a graduate degree. So at least from my point of view, some of the advice that you provided seems reasonable for a graduate student to do, and sort of like, oh, I can develop these projects on the side, or like even as part of their own research, and showcase this like independent ability to do things, get things done. Do you all think that this would be realistic for an undergraduate to do? And if maybe not to the same degree, could you provide some insight into what, how can an undergrad, and if there's room for undergraduates to apply directly into these positions, these types of positions, what does that look like, and what do you advise?
I just finished speaking. I see Aaron vigorously nodding his head, so I'm going to let Aaron go.
I was very fortunate to have an undergrad advisor that helped me go through some undergraduate research projects. And had I not done some work in homotopy analysis for difference equations, I would not have understood what quantum annealing was, and been able to read papers about quantum annealing and QAOA and some of these advanced techniques that I learned when I was an undergrad from doing an undergraduate research project that wasn't part of traditional curriculum in that. And I think, again, I think undergrads have the capacity to learn. They have the capacity to implement projects and get focused on something that they can contribute to in a meaningful way. There's so much work to be done in this field. We have a huge mountain to climb as a whole field, and I think being able to bring together undergrads is very important. Some of them will be done at that phase and will help be a research assistant in a lab or in an academic group. Absolutely. We have many software engineers who come in from the undergrad and develop great software. So, I mean, there's certainly, I know people who were at D-Wave that did all the calibration with an undergraduate degree and started from that. So it's certainly doable. It's something, if you find something you want to do, go after it.
Yeah, just to jump in and add to that. Yeah, my undergrad career was the same. Again, because I was a little bit more intentional because I knew what I wanted to do by this point, I curated my undergrad internships such that I was learning skills that I would need for my professional career. So I worked at like NAVAIR, so the Naval Air Warfare Center. I worked there, it was in Patuxent River, Maryland. I worked in an atomic physics lab, and I learned what, cooling of rubidium-85, atoms was. I learned about various different optical setups. I learned about magneto-optical traps. I learned about fiber alignments, and I made sure that the grad student I was working with allowed me to touch and align and mess up, right, and succeed and fail, such that I understood what it was to build these systems. And I had other internships that were one internship was theory-based, but even then I still was working in the lab next to a graduate student, applying some of that to see if we could, design some experiments for the theory to produce some experimental results. But yeah, so I kind of curated my undergrad career such that, because I knew I wanted to go to industry eventually. So it wasn't even necessarily for grad school applications. It was, I'm building a career early, showing that I know how to work with my hands, so to speak, or I can get my hands dirty in the lab, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work and build these complex setups and align them and understand device behavior, understand RF chains and electronic components of systems. And so because I was looking at those job descriptions like, oh, I really don't know what that means, but it sounds interesting. Let me learn about it. So to be clear, I'm not learning stuff just because, oh, you know, I'll need that. If it was interesting to me and I saw that it was a valued skill, then I went about doing it. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. Any others want to share a little bit on that? The undergraduate preparation aspect and how that level of degree fits into the industry?
Maybe I can go. So while I think, yeah, so I think getting some experience as an undergrad would be great. The groups that I've worked in mostly, well, so maybe it's changing also in the quantum industry, but has been very research heavy. So one thing to keep in mind is where you want to end up and also how you see the field progressing. I know it's hard to predict the future, so you'll have to do this hard, you know, solve the hard problem of trying to figure out where the field will go and where you want to be. But one thing to keep in mind for sure is, you know, that so far it's been very research heavy, which means that all the groups that I was in, at least, you know, there were PhDs and there were undergrad, for example, internship opportunities and projects and stuff like that. But eventually, there's, you know, they expect people to grow to a point where they can hire them as PhDs. But if you know, this has been changing, yeah, then it'll be nice to hear from others what they feel.
And if it hasn't, then it's important to know that realistic expectation from the workforce needs, right?
Yeah.
That there's a need for, you know, you need to go to grad school as a realistic
Right. So
step.
in fact, with the masters, there are some, you know, positions that we have, for example, but I think most of those positions are also people who are interested in doing a PhD. But yeah, but certainly starting while you're an undergrad with various courses or internships or projects would be, you know, help you gear to, you know, or hone your skills, I guess, to get into this field.
One of the key currencies in this field is papers, publications, and the ability to support publication, generate publication, come up with new ideas for publication, to advance the field is very important. Some people have the opportunity to be able to do that at an undergraduate level, but you know, you will cap out eventually in that in terms of the type of stuff that you get opportunities for, in terms of leading projects and being part of new proposals and things, without having either extraordinarily capabilities, that in which case, why didn't you get a PhD? You know, in terms of your research acumen, or you know, you're just getting access. I think a PhD, masters, certainly provide access to opportunities you might not get as an undergrad. But I mean, I've had undergrads publish many papers in our group as interns. We've hired them as research assistants, and some of them were like, I don't know why I would leave this job because I'm doing exactly what I'd like to do once I get my PhD. I was like, because you're going to be able to lead a program like this after you get your PhD. And have even more impact into the research being done. So, you know, PhDs are really hard and soul crushing, humbling experiences for almost everyone I've ever known. So I wouldn't say you have to start off by going PhD. Make sure you love it, and a good internship, good master's program, these things help guide you, I think.
Yeah, maybe I can add a comment on that. Maybe on the dual side, instead of telling you what can you do with a bachelor, I can tell you what I'm looking for personally in people I'm going to be hiring. I'm just starting at IonQ. The goal is to build a team working on quantum error correction. I'm the first one working on the topic, so the first thing I'm going to look for is someone to help me build the team, and it's going to be someone with a PhD and with a strong research experience in quantum error correction, knowing everything I don't know about error correction, ideally, so that we can cover everything together. Even 2 people is not going to be enough. And the second thing I'm going to be hiring very soon is also interns doing their bachelor or their master. And for them, I'm going to look for someone with a strong programming experience and capable of reading and understanding research papers. So it's still research, but the goal of the intern is often going to be to simulate an idea, check if it works, and design part of the idea. It's a half-baked idea. It's maybe not going to work the first time, so you will have to modify it. For that, you need to understand the math behind, but you need strong programming skills as well. And in that direction, within 1 year, maybe 2 years, I'm hoping to hire someone doing all the simulations, like someone maintaining the code, someone building all the code that we need to do the research. And that needs to be someone who either is a researcher who loves programming, who wants to go in that direction, or someone with strong programming skills, who is capable of talking to mathematicians. And often it has to be a mathematician. And it doesn't matter what the degree of this person, whether it's a bachelor, a master, or a PhD. What matters is that they like what they do and they have the right skills, both on the programming side and on the math side. And yeah, so it could be someone with a bachelor. And I think it's going to be more and more people with a bachelor doing this kind of job.
All right, thanks for that insight, Nicola. Okay, so time has been flying by. Actually, we only are 10 minutes away from the time we allocated for the panel. We have a few questions that were from the audience, but they're a little bit on the specific, like, technical side of things. So I'm going to just offer, without having asked, that the panelists maybe can receive them by email, and if you have something that you can kind of like help address that, we can do that after the panel. But so to wrap up, I wanted to maybe get a little bit more on the personal side, but still keep in mind when you answer this question, this idea of the trajectory you've been through, going from an academic degree into now working in industry in QIS, and sort of like all the themes that we have considered about math, and like transferable skills, all of that. I'm going to ask every panelist to answer this question, but I'm going to allow you to pick. So the question is, how do you define failure or success? So pick either of those and answer either. So how do you define failure or success? And what is a major failure or success that you can recall? And how did you, if you're like talking about a success, just give us the example, or the failure, just give us the example. So let's start with Tuhin.
Yeah, so I don't really think in terms of failure and success typically. So this is kind of hard. I view, but while doing research, like, it's very rare to have a complete success or a complete failure. Even like things that don't work teach you something. And that's why one of the reasons why I really enjoy it. In terms of, failures, like, so I'll tell you what I find challenging and what I really enjoy. So every time, like, I learned something new, like, so when I first got into QIS, it was very challenging. Like, I had to read papers, the language was different, as it was mentioned. So I was learning the language of a new community. And I wrote proposals which failed. I tried, implementing algorithms and trying new things that failed. But each of those things was a learning experience for me. And so, and which is why I choose to do this kind of work, because I genuinely enjoy the intellectual challenge that arises from trying something new out. So that's somehow how I see things. I don't know if this really addresses your question well, but yeah, I'll be interested to hear how others think. Yeah.
I'll have to just confess that my idea behind this question is to try to deconstruct this concept of failure and success. So I mean, you're kind of like going that direction. But let's hear from the others. So let's go with Aaron now.
Yeah, I think, echoing, I think the growth mindset is very important, in terms of there's to me, graduate school was a very humbling experience in general, filled with many effective failures at the moment, or disappointment, so to speak. And I think there's some grit and learning how to make those into learning experiences is, I think, one of the chief successes of grad school, to try to build that resilience and ability to reshape, reframe, and move forward. So to me, I think that's really the, both in terms of the success is, being able to learn from your experience and not be viewing it as failure. I guess, one other piece of that is, I think there's, some valuable insight about, pain is almost certain, but suffering is an option. Pain's usually there to help you learn, to adapt. And I think as long as you can do that, you're going to be successful in learning. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Aaron. Let's hear from Michelle.
All right. So I'm similar to Tuhin in how I think about failure and success, but I will say, as an undergrad, everything around you is failure or success, right? Your exams, your homework problem sets, things like that. You either do well or you don't. And it's unfortunate, but that's the way the educational system is. However, so it's more poignant to students because you're basically operating in this system of weekly problem sets, exams, final exams. Let you in a secret, doesn't change when you get to grad school. And so I had to reframe my failure and success understanding. And really it came down to things that almost kind of were cultural in the way that we process failure and success. So failure to me and success is based on what I value. When I was an undergrad, that was not the case. It took me becoming a graduate student to recognize that what some people valued in academia, I couldn't care less about because I knew I was going to industry. And so that helped me reframe my understanding of success and failure. So if I failed an exam, and if I'm honest with you, that was the qualifying exam, that's grad school. But for undergrad, did I fail exams? For sure, right? And in undergrad, when you're in a STEM field, I'm not talking about fail with an F, I'm talking about fail with a C, right? Like everyone, you want to have your A's and your B's, and a C is kind of bad. And I had to remember that, one, I came into this field new. So I was not the little kid that tinkered with all the little toys and broke stuff apart, put it back together, right? I was not a typical physicist. I didn't look up at the stars and wish to be an astrophysicist, right? Like that wasn't me. And so I had the benefit of coming to the field from the outside. And I think that helped me. For you all that are on the inside, when you are processing, problem set after problem set, exam after exam, and maybe you're not performing the way you should be, I think you have to look at what you value. Do you value success? Are you going to graduate? Yes, right? If you're at a place where you're like, I don't know, this might not be for me, I don't even like school, that could be something to think about. But I think that for the most students, they're like, hey, look, I'm going to graduate, I'm going to do this thing until I get out of here. And the mind reshaping is once you get to grad school or to your career, people really couldn't care less, right? If you're going into industry, what can you do to make our bottom line better? What can you do to help us push this new technology out for humanity, right? That's what they care about. It's unfortunate that in the educational system, it is framed in the kind of grade and grade point situation. And so what you have to remember is that, and I think Aaron just alluded to this, that the suffering is optional, right? Are you going to go through and have days where you're like, oh man, I didn't do well here, or I really couldn't understand this problem set, or hey, can we all work together so we can, have a little bit more understanding of what's going on here? Yes, you will. But the sooner you understand that that's just a part of the process, the more you can kind of disassociate from the internalization of, oh, I'm a failure, so my value is less. The sooner you can disassociate, okay, this is a part of the process. I'm not going to win them all. I want to win them all, but I'm not going to win them all. that will make things, I think, a lot easier, especially in this day of mental health discussion, right? So that's something I would put to you. Start to try to reshape and reframe what failure and success to look to you. You know, don't feel horrible because you failed, but don't also get on your high horse, right? Because you're succeeding all the time, because it's all a part of the process.
Thanks, Michelle. All right, let's hear from Hari.
So I really like the answers so far. And in fact, what I'm about to say might just be rephrasing what Michelle just said, but let me say it anyway. But yeah, I mean, I think you have to basically define what you consider failure and success. And in fact, you'll see, I think, that it gets easier so it might be very rigid when you're an undergrad and maybe a little bit less rigid, you know, when you start grad school. And you'll see that you get to define these things much more as you progress. So, and how you define them really matters, because you could, like, you know, like Aaron said, reduce your suffering, right? I mean, pain is always going to be there. And what you learn from it is important. And what you define as success is also important, because that's what will get you, you know, or your positions or any kind of accolades that you might be aspiring to get, these things, right? So I think you know, there's no definite answer as to what each of them are. So what I like, for example, for me, I you know, like take joy, I guess, in seeing my work being used in other papers, which happened recently when, in fact, in collaboration with Konstantina, and you know, further work after that. And, you know, this kind of thing kind of, you know, you can celebrate little things, I guess, and then, you know, move on and try to do more stuff like that. So I think some of these are very important.
Thanks, Hari. And Nicolas, Nicola, you have the final word as we wrap up.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's important to talk about failures. We all go through that. We all don't get the job we want, don't get something we want. And I think we should stay positive. I think Michelle mentioned that it's good to be stoic, and what I find the best partnership, the best deal when you're looking for a job for both you and the company is that both are in line. If your personal goals, if what you like to work on is exactly in line with what the company wants, with what your university wants, your PhD advisor wants, then it works very well. It works very well because you don't need to be managed. You want to do something and they want you to do it. And I think a rejection is often because you're just not perfectly in line. The company wants something different, or you want something different. And you will find something more appropriate, something better later. It often ends up like that. Personally, I can tell you one of my rejection. I did apply to academia before during my postdoc. I was planning to go back to France to take an academic position. I got ranked second for one job I really wanted. The guy who was ranked first proved a result that was open for 30 years. He made a huge breakthrough. And yeah, I could not compete. I didn't get the job. And the year after, when I started to apply again, industry was there offering exciting position. And I love it. I love working in industry, building this machine. I'm very glad I didn't go to academia, at least first. Maybe I will go at some point in the future. I still like this idea. But in my case, it created an opportunity that I would not have had.
Thanks, Nicola. And I think that's a great way to wrap up the session on failure and success, in that sometimes what seems like a failure at one point then becomes, you know, life. That's how life is, and then you end up finding opportunities and you can thrive later. Sadly, time flew by and we're out of time at this point. I want to thank our panelists for great discussion. We really didn't have time to talk about everything that I wanted to, so we might have to have a sequel, but we'll see about that. With that said, yeah, there are a few questions that I hope I can send you by email to get our audience, their questions fulfilled.
Maybe
Everyone,
also, Daniel, just really quickly, if you wouldn't
Yeah.
mind, if the participants would like, if you can maybe share LinkedIn's, if folks are okay with that, then maybe people can connect and ask questions that way too. If they
for sure, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. That would be awesome. I agree with that idea. I just wanted to say there's a link in the chat for input on this panel. So the audience, if you have just a few minutes, we would appreciate your input. Otherwise, any final words from anyone as we wrap up?
You should work on what you like.
Quantum needs you.
Quantum needs you. There you
Quantum needs you.
Yeah.
go. Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to the
Thank you all.
panelists, to all attendees. Hope this was a good experience.
Thank you.